All right. Welcome, everybody. We are back. I guess this is our first secondary decimal. We're into episode 11 now of the B2B Growth Lab. Today, we've chosen the invisible bottleneck, which is how poor internal communications actually cost you customers. I think about this in the kind of health sort of space for a minute, the way that eventually your diet starts to show up on your skin. It'll affect your brand, it'll affect your appearance, it'll affect the experience of your customers. It'll most definitely affect your bottom line. And so, hopefully we're going to really dig into not only identifiers of internal chaos, but some of the ways that you can solve it, because again, that is showing up outside of the four walls or wherever you say you exist and however you say you do things. If your team isn't clearly communicating across sales, onboarding, delivery, support, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting everybody else. And that could be churn, that could be future deals, that could be just the erosion of your brand. So let's dig into this. Let's talk about why over communication isn't necessarily the answer, how it's important to have, principles, practices, structures, and how clarity is really the thing that makes it work. And saw a word here, I know it's somebody's favorite, transparency across your departments as well. So who wants to help start this off?
Well, can we first go right to the top and talk about vision, mission, and values, and like being completely transparent with that, helping your people know where we're going and why, right? Annual meeting, memo, quarterly meeting, pass down, whatever. If you don't share that, how can you expect your people to serve your customers? Right? If they don't understand, we want to be the blankest blankety blank in what time frame. And your part in helping us get there is by serving our customers in an awesome, masterful way, right? Like relate their job back to the big picture and then watch them perform.
So I have a question about that already, and I want to start pulling at this thread.
Yeah.
I suspect that there's a distinction. I don't think there should be one, but there is what we put on the wall when we hired an interior decorator, and we're like, we need to put something up here in the foyer, and then the actual day-to-day stuff. And how big of a gap is there between those two things, and how do we solve that?
This is such a wildly attractive tangent. But let's not derail the whole conversation. But you're absolutely onto something, Jacob. It is fairly widely known that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of only 20% of companies actually eat, breathe, walk their vision, mission, values. 80% just have it as boilerplate and a recruiting tool, right? It's brand and brand only. It's not actually the reality when you get there. So yeah, we could let's make that episode 12. So let's get all the way into
an entire episode to the thing we made up that we no longer observe. And let's focus on today's topic.
Right.
I think that Rob is accurate, though. In my experience, most of the time, vision, mission, values are just lip service. It doesn't define the culture at all.
Right.
And the unfortunate thing is that I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I think that this is where Simon Sinek got it right.
Okay.
Because I do think that when you are looking to attract internal candidates, vision, mission, value, and being authentic in that works wonders. And I think that then impacts how your employees show up for your customers, your paying customers.
Got it.
If they think that the whole organization is lined up behind them, they feel empowered, right? They're well tooled, equipped, right? They have whatever they need to be able to address demands, conflicts, errors, right? Opportunities, right? If they feel like the whole org is behind them and what they're doing is aligned with the mission to serve this customer, to win this sale, to solve this problem, why wouldn't they be able to do that in an excellent way and get you that 5-star rating, right? Like, yeah, get the whole org rowing in the same direction, talking and walking the same talk and walk, right? Consistency and culture through communication. And then watch your customers start singing your praises, right?
Well, and if I may, because I do agree with that, I think that vision, mission, values is one way to do that. I think that the other way to do that is to just simply align around your customer and align around what is the outcome that they want.
Right.
And what is my small part? Yeah, I'm in accounting. Yeah, I am, the janitor, but what's my one small part of making sure that that outcome is created for the customer?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So we're looking at a potential thread here, and that is this customer-centric Kaizen, right? We want to make it better for them, right? Maybe ourselves on the way there, but for them. What do you think can be done to catch misalignments, right? Because I poked fun at this in the beginning. We already agreed to do a whole episode on it where it's like the top down, this is who we are and what we say. And then, let's use a traditional hierarchy. There's the top, there's the middle, and there's those below that. How do you put in a system of awareness? I don't even want to say checks and balances, but awareness of like we are on point or we're not. Right? Like roads are pretty convenient. They have those lines that you steer between. They have those rumble strips now. If it's a sketchy road, there's even concrete you can run into before you go off the road. But who puts that in place inside a company?
Boy, I think it's the responsibility of leadership and doing something like pass down, clear transparency. I remember back, when I was the head of global talent development, you go to the senior leadership meeting, you heard a lot. You couldn't share all of it, right? But you heard a lot. And I would have a standing meeting with my team like 2 days after that meeting. And in that 2 days time, I would appropriately redact, right? Like figure out what not to share. But then everything else, lacking no detail. Hey, this product manufacturing section is struggling with this quality issue. Does the talent development department really need to know that? It's not practically actionable, no. But if I expect them to be on a team and own some share of each other's success, if I want one company, we need to know what each other's doing. We can't have the silos. And part of that is efficient transparency and pass down. I told them everything I could as often as I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
So saying things, telling the truth about them, right? Back to the transparency. How does that make it out of these meetings and into the Slack, where it's part of day to day, I guess, is the thing. Like, is the expectation or the understanding that because you had that meeting, then everybody, that you're leading understands that, but how do they remain present to it, right? Like this is, I think one of the tricky things here is it takes consistency to take those principles off that wall and turn them into daily life. And so how do you create an environment or a culture or a practice where that is front and center, as important or more important than this, that, or the other?
Yeah, there's some really interesting options for that now. In Slack, you could do channels. In Teams, you could do channels. And I would say celebration, recognition it's not luggage, it's not points or money. It's just celebrating with likes, hearts, all the things we do in social media, but do it within your company. Have channels for what really matters in your business. People post, people visit. Who doesn't want the dopamine and the acetylcholine and all the other neurotransmitters you get with this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, especially your younger team members, millennials and Gen Z, who are already living that lifestyle outside work. Hey, I just won a sale. Like. Hey, I just solved a customer complaint. Thumbs up, heart, right? Like bring that alive through Slack or through Teams or through whatever infrastructure you have. Just some channels
Mm-hmm.
where you could where peer recognition can just thrive. And people love it. They reach out for help on it, right? I'm struggling with this, and then they go help each other, right? Who
Right.
wins? The customer.
They may not even exit the workplace to get that stuff because they're lacking it during working hours.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that I like about what I'm hearing here as well is that it's like, I think most of the time management sort of feels like they need to create this cult of personality around themselves in an organization. Like everyone in the organization needs to be their groupie. And I think they've got it the wrong way. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is that really what it needs to be is that management needs to facilitate opportunities for everyone to be everyone else's groupie. Like everyone to be on everybody else's cheering team and like just shouting from the rooftops the praises of everyone else. And it's like your team isn't going to trust you less because you give them more opportunities to shine.
What's really your job as a leader, right? To govern, create opportunity, right? Strategy, right? Budgeting. You're responsible for putting the systems in place that help your people thrive and perform. So sometimes that's SOP, sometimes it's recognitions, it's communication, it's all those things. Your job is getting people to perform. Make sure they have the information tools they need. Part of the information they need is, am I doing a good job? Is what I'm doing important? Does it matter? Do I matter? Right?
I think defining and clarifying the bottom line, right? Because am I doing a good job for who? For my team, for my KPIs? What KPIs? Is the KPI this many outbound this week, or is the KPI this many people ecstatic with the conversations we had? Right? There's a really interesting study a while back. I believe it was Harvard Business Review. And they took a call center and split it down the middle, and they said, everybody on this side, hit your numbers. And then everybody on this side, work through the exact same script, but with the best of intentions. And their performance was quadruple, right? The peer driven metrics. So it's transferable. Like that's a real ROI of just like make sure it's a fantastic experience for the person I'm interacting with. And so I guess again we're back to that question that I'm kind of not going to stop asking for today, which is how do you get that stuff off the wall and into, the day-to-day behavioral things?
You know, one of the things that I've seen companies do is consistent interviewing of the customers. They are eternally scheduling interviews with customers. Because remember earlier we said you can, be as authentic as you want in the vision, mission, value statements of the company that you can create. But if that is not customer centric, then to me, it's still worthless. And so it's like, you have to help people understand, why do those vision, mission, values matter in terms of the impact I'm having on my customers? How is what I do going to change their life? How is what I do selling them, the most amazing CRM ever going to change their life? How is me selling them blank CDs going to change their life? How is me manufacturing these blank CDs going to change their life? Like, people need that bigger picture in order to connect the dots and really feel relevant. And I think that oftentimes we forget to give people the big picture, or we think that they don't care about it, or that it's not valuable for them, or that it's a waste of our time because they're just cogs in a machine anyway.
Yeah. We tell them the what, we don't tell them the why. Right.
But what I'm hearing is being really intentional, because the one thing you repeated over and over was change their life. Everything else was a variable. Right. So again, I think if that can be established, it's like, your job is to change their life. Here's how. Right. And so just to lean on Mr. Cynic for a second there, here's the why, and then we'll talk about the how next, because obviously there's a service or a project or something that is the pass through to this life-changing experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that why, though, we have to be careful, because oftentimes if we buy into what Simon Sinek says, Simon says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. But I think he's wrong. Think about it this way. When was the last time, Rob, you bought a toaster? Did you buy a toaster because you wanted to join some perfect toast movement and you wanted to invite all of your neighbors over to see your brand new toaster? Hey, Bob, come see the new toaster. No, you wanted toasted bread.
Yeah.
And when we get so caught up in this golden circle concept and this why concept, we miss the big picture, which is the functionality of the thing.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we can talk about the emotional and social aspects, but we also need to be sure that we emphasize that functional aspect as well, because no one's going to buy a toaster that doesn't toast bread.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You do want a super clear, functional, deliverable result. And I love leaning on this idea. It should, exponentially return on the cost, the effort, the labor, the expense, whatever it is. You should be getting more from it. For example, I don't know how many runs a toaster is good for, but it better be tens of thousands of slices, not 14. I'm going to get mad.
I have a really odd example here of blenders, right?
Okay.
If my wife and I, we use our blender more than the average bear.
Right.
And when you're making, I would call them proper vegetable smoothies, and you're trying to grind up roughage, right? And like, you put a little bit of yogurt in there, you put, an orange in there, you add a little bit of sweet, you figure it out. So you can stomach it, and it's enjoyable and incredibly nutritious.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that to most blenders that you can get at your local, lowest price store, we were smoking a blender about once every 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
So our use case on the what, right? We had it solid about the what. Our what changed, and we knew our what changed. So I ended up with a Breville blender, right? It's like $200 and some for a blender. And you're like, why would you spend that much money on the blender? Well, we're back to your point, Zach, right? The solid what, if it doesn't do what I need it to do, then I don't care, right?
Right. Now I want to add to this a second, because I think that this sort of ties everything together. So you went with a Breville blender, which is a $200 plus blender, because you had a very specific outcome that you needed to create. You know, they say in the niches are the riches.
Yeah.
That is a niche, right? We don't niche around, hey, Rob, you are a veteran. You are married. You have this many kids. You live in this state. You live in this city. You do this job. You're poster book guy for a Breville blender. No, you bought a Breville blender because you're making these vegetable smoothies, and you're like, I can't afford to smoke a blender once a month.
Right.
And so it's like, I need a blender that I can use to make vegetable smoothies that will last me 5 years. Right?
Right.
That is a niche. That's a niche. And when your team is very clear, I'm creating smoothies, or I'm creating blenders for guys like Rob and his wife who need a smoothie. They need it to be able to handle, like, if I'm putting carrots, if I'm putting broccoli, if I'm putting bok choy in this thing, like, it's got to be able to handle all of it and say, thank you, ma'am, may I have another? Right? Like, that is so important. And you can take that and you can message that with every single person in your organization and say, we are the blender of choice. We are the best damn blender on the market when it comes to making vegetable smoothies and making sure that people get the nutrition that they need, because nutrition matters. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about Simon Sinek's golden circle, but it's in the right context of the functionality in the driver's seat, the emotion and social aspects behind it. Because now you're like, hey, Bob, come check out my new blender. Why the hell are you asking me to come check out your blender? Well, because it's a Breville. It's the most expensive blender on the market. You've got to see it, right? All of a sudden, now that matters. And that's something that you can use with internal communication to message up and down the command chain and horizontally throughout your organization. But it all starts with focusing on that customer and what are they trying to create.
So specificity really has to get brought to the why.
Yeah.
A great degree of it. There's an oldie but a goodie out there in terms of marketing. I'm a huge fan of the work that they did. Not just because of the cheesy music, not just because of the CEO in the white lab coat, but because the theme of their marketing was, will it blend?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
They did such a brilliant job of that. Like, let's not even talk about roughage. It's a right.
An iPhone, will it blend?
Yeah.
Right.
But
we
again,
are important.
Reaching past that, because obviously, if it can grind apart some hockey pucks, then a beat is not going to be a challenge.
Right.
And
Brilliant
so,
marketing. Brilliant.
Well, yeah, I think there's something to lean into here in the terms of, again, how the internal communication of the values of the organization can go for, let's surpass the goal of the customer, right? We're almost back to that. Can I get 10x out of what I'm paying for? Right? And like the blender is kind of an easy example because, yeah, it'll grind way more than a vegetable. Like, should you? No. But it is that good. It works that well. And so I guess that's one of the questions is, how far do you think you should go into product development to make sure that your thing is the best so that it far exceeds, the thing that you're trying to do to make your customers happy, I guess.
This is all about positioning, right? This is like who you're going to be within the context of your competitive market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? If your target you do one thing. If you're Breville, you do one thing. If you're Blendtec, it's a different thing,
Mhm.
right? If you're Walmart, it's a different thing, right? So
Right.
they're all different intentionally. So you got to figure out what your intention is, who you strive to be, what position in the market, where do you fit? Because over engineering your car, like BMW does,
Mhm.
right? Unless you're going to demand that price, unless you're going to try and compete for that business. And there's a place for Honda, there's a place for Toyota. There's
Mhm.
only so much room at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
We haven't even gone into Koenigseggs and other, super premium luxury cars. But
Mhm.
Well, and I love the point that you're making here, because I think you're absolutely right. Like, you have to decide who you want to serve,
Yeah.
because I think a great example of this is Tesla and Slate, and Ford Motor Company, actually, the one that Henry Ford started. So Henry Ford started a car company back in the 1900s, and he said, this is the working man's automobile. This is the one that everyone can afford. And he
yes,
charged it, he priced it accordingly, and it was not great. It wasn't great. It wasn't very reliable. It was reliable enough that, like, you could get to where you wanted to go, and it was simple enough that you could fix it yourself if you had to, right? So it got that job done, and Henry Ford built an empire on that. And then we have Tesla, and Elon Musk comes in and says, we are creating the luxury electric vehicle. We are creating the electric vehicle that people will compare with Porsche, and they will compare with Lexus and Audi.
right.
Like, that's what we're building. Now you have Jeff Bezos, who comes out with what's called Slate automobiles. And Slate is a pickup truck, and it costs $20,000. And
Right.
it's an EV. And he's following the same exact model that Henry Ford did back in the early 1900s, right? And it's like, both car companies can exist in the same market, but they are going after different people. The Slate pickup truck is going after somebody who's like, I just need something that can get me to and from work. I'm not going to take this pickup truck and I'm not going to drive 400 miles in this thing. I'm just going to use it to commute to and from work. And I want to feel like I'm contributing to the environment by doing it, right? And you have Elon Musk there with Teslas that's like, I want to be the coolest, most luxurious car out there, right? They're two different things, two different markets, two different people that they're selling to. And if you're looking at it as, well, he's an EV and he's an EV and they're competing, then your strategy is going to be all wrong. You're going to waste millions of dollars targeting the wrong person and trying to position yourself against Tesla, which will never work.
Got it. So this brings up an interesting concept because, again, a lot of the service-based stuff that we're talking about is backed by tech now. You have an opportunity in tech, which is design and sell modular, right? Give them what they need, and then as they need more, build on top of that based on the necessity rather than shoving 177 different things down their throat from day one, or even offering them. Right. And so I guess part of my curiosity here is how do you train your team to find the fit of your product to the customer? Right. Because if your job is serving them, you have to know enough about it to be like, this sounds like this component is the thing that you need the most right now.
I really think it just comes down to, you've got to get the reps in, right? Like, what separates a beginner violinist from a master violinist? 10,000 hours. And like, the more they get the reps in, the more experience they get, the more they see, oh, my customer needs this from me and not that from me. And yeah, you can give that to them on the front end, but there's only so much that academic provision can really clarify in their minds.
Okay.
Yeah, post-mortem as you go. You don't always have to get the full 10,000 hours, but your proficiency will cross some form of a tipping point as you grow, right? You'll get into, call it tacit competence, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you'll just say, oh, I accidentally did that correctly. Oh, here I am. Now I'm good enough, right? And you might get better. You might get better, but you're good enough at some point. And when you start surprising yourself because you've gotten enough reps, then you should feel reasonably confident that you're meeting your customers' needs, right? Oh, I'm adapting on the fly. Oh, I handled that well. But you got to be somewhat reflective. You got to do a postmortem on yourself. Spend some time processing what just happened. Give yourself credit. Don't be too hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Coach, right? Like, what will I do differently next time? Right. I will win that customer next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And whose role is that? If we go back to the minimum 3 tiers that we were talking about earlier, is that a leadership thing, like from the top down? Is it a Kaizen thing of like you, the people face to face in the tech support department, come back and tell us like how our thing actually works because you're facing the customer? Is it a blend of it?
I think there's a technology piece that usually comes from somewhere other than leadership, right? So that tech knowledge, how does it work? What's features? What's the application? All that kind of stuff. Often from product development, R&D development, like something in that realm, depending on what we're talking about, hardware, software.
Mm-hmm.
But then teaching the discipline around the mental process, not just the process of the sales call, but how you treat yourself. And when you get back in your car or the call is over, what do you do? And teach reflection, kindness, and self-coaching. I think that's role modeled by leaders, coached by leaders.
Okay.
That's maybe one of the greatest values that frontline leaders can offer to their people in a high trust environment. Sit down, close the door, and say, how do you think that went? What would you do to be more awesome next time? Okay. And over time, they learn to do that on their own.
Got it.
I wonder as well how much of a component there is of recognizing that you don't know everything or that you don't need to know everything. I was talking with a guy today who he was saying basically in the past he'd hired consultants because he said, yeah, I could do it pretty well, but if I wanted a really comprehensive job done, then I could go with this other guy. And I think that part of it is saying, what is the level of quality we want done, but also I don't need to know everything. I don't need to be able to do everything. And I think that that's really hard.
Do the leaders train the managers to be coaches so that the managers coach the staff and then do the staff coach the customers? How far reaching is it? Does it stop internally and then turn into service? Is service actually becoming a coach because you're in the customer service department and you're just like, let me see how I can make this work for you?
It's an interesting question. There are definitely some situations where a coaching mindset is an effective sales technique, but that's not exactly a challenger sale or an inside sale, is it? So I meet the customer where they're at and what do you need to do to close? So sometimes it probably transitions to service, but
That's what I'm curious about, right? Like past the sale into that onboarding and fulfillment phase. Like, how long does the coaching continue?
I think the coaching is in perpetuity. I think that's what a lot of people are missing. So I'm going to bring the Bible into this a minute. Jesus Christ says, "He who would be greatest among you, let him first be your servant," or "let him be the chief servant among you," something like that. If you want to be a truly great company, you get the privilege of serving your customers. To me, the coaching never stops. The service never stops. Even after they've received value, that time to value KPI that a lot of businesses are monitoring. Once they've received value, your coaching doesn't stop because they're hiring you to create progress, to get an outcome. And you have to consistently be on tap to provide that outcome. If you're not, then they'll fire you and hire someone who will.
That's what I'm being curious about, right? Because out there you hear the secret is to be sticky, right? But again, I've poked fun at this so many times now, it's getting boring, but like, the stickiness is supposed to be useful, not hard to cancel.
Yes.
Right. And so again, like, how do you set up this environment where there is that coaching, that training, that support to be like, oh my God, I can't believe this thing is so useful, amazing, productive, like whatever you say your result is, times these multiples.
I think we talked about getting the reps in.
Mhm.
To me, this is like, you get the reps in enough that your team knows what to expect and can actually predict that, because they say, Rob really needs this, which means in 2 weeks he'll come back asking this question. So in 10 days, I'm going to send him an email with a guide that says, hey, just thinking about you, thought this might be something that interests you, because they have enough experience.
This kind of starts bringing us towards another episode that we did, because my assumption is at a certain point, because the internals are so committed to this premise, the customer starts bragging about it, right? And then you get the brand, the referral, all that float, or that lifetime value stuff that isn't just them, it's an us. And so, yeah, I guess like that's the point I'm asking, or why I'm asking these questions, is I think there is something there. There are a couple places I've been a customer of where I'd say I've experienced that.
That's systemically created, right? That's holistically created. That consistency that we're talking about, all the alignment and everything, the positioning, the branding, the service dimension, yeah. When you get it right, that's what you get, is that noble stickiness.
That's a great term for it. So with that nobility comes sustainability, like ongoing.
Absolutely.
How do you lengthen that lifetime value to a lifetime, I guess, is the question.
Okay. All right. So this is something that I've been asking myself quite a lot lately. And I read a book by Rita McGrath called The End of Competitive Advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And what that book talks about is that the traditional business strategy model is you go out, you find a core competitive advantage based off of the VRIO framework: valuable, rare, inimitable, and you are organized to take advantage of it. And then you build a freaking castle, man. Like moat, tall towers, crocodiles in the water, like machine gun turrets, whatever it takes to stop people from getting to it. The problem is that we live in an increasingly rapidly evolving business model, and AI is only going to increase that rate because it's going to make it easier and easier for people without coders to prototype technology that can solve their problem. You can set a timer on this. In 15 years, coders will be a job of the past. AI will be doing it all, and you will be able to say, hey, I need an app that I can sync up with my sprinklers that will also only water specific, you can be very specific and it'll do it. I guarantee it. 15 years time, you can set the timer. Point being, because you are so rapidly evolving, you can no longer think of yourself as, building these castles. You have to think of yourself as competing as a gladiator in an arena. And occasionally, they're going to throw in bits of technology. They're going to throw in garbage. They're going to throw in tools. They're going to throw in toys into that arena. And as the chief strategy officer, as the chief whatever officer, as the leader in that organization, as a member in the market, you have to look at what's being put in that arena and say, does it apply? Does it apply? Because if it applies, I've got to adopt that technology faster than anyone else and build a competitive transient advantage that has a lifetime on it and apply and use that as quickly as possible. Because if I don't, my competition will, and I'm out. Think of what happened with Kodak. Think of what happened with Blockbuster and Netflix. There was new technology that came out that they saw in the market. They took advantage of it, and they were able to create a very core advantage. And they're going to be losing that advantage. Look at what AI is doing with things like Sora, Google Video. They're able to create video now that looks like it was produced by a movie studio very quickly and easily.
Did we just lose Zach? What happened? Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
I'm here. I have a daughter who's trying to get to karate class, and so
it's almost time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to leave early. I apologize, gentlemen. Great conversation. I trust you to take it home.
As always, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jacob? Get everyone aligned, transparency, communication in the interest of serving your customers, defining your customer, making sure your position is solid, well thought, right? Getting that whole thing aligned.
Yeah.
And then let's not silo. Let's not do that.
And I think the most important thing that I've heard consistently is stop pretending it's a box you can check.
That's right.
Right. And maybe even consider having that as a part of the KPI. Right? Like, did I hit my 26 outreaches today? Check. How many of them were a wonderful conversation where the person left saying, thank you so much for giving me a call? Right? And create metrics within metrics so you're measuring what actually matters instead of just the raw numbers.
The performance and the behavior, not just
the
action.
Yeah. That seems to be a critical piece. And that seems to me to be leading us towards the customer service or account manager or whoever as a coach, not just a rep. Right? I'm here to do the white hat Western thing of I made it better. It's okay for me to move on now. So yeah, I think those are really critical components. And my guess is that anyone who does incorporate that is going to really experience, an uptick in the things that matter more than those other numbers. Let's just say that. So anything else that you think needs to be stated or understood? Because people tend to remember the last few things anyway.
That I think it's Zach's point about do a little reflection here and think about all the companies that aren't companies anymore because all they did was build a castle.
Right.
The CEO of Google said almost this exact same thing at one of his most recent press conferences, that you just got to hang on because we built a castle and now we're trying to figure out how to tear down the walls and become more agile.
Right.
So it's times are changing, and that agility is a thing. So get your org ready, right? Get them aligned, properly positioned, carve out your piece, but don't build a castle.
You're not really strengthening alignment if your balance isn't being challenged.
Right.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time. And thanks to Zach for being here as well. And for those of you who are watching, I'd love to hear what you think, have to say, or most importantly, what your reflections are, because anything that you share about that helps everyone else. Thank you so much.
Yeah. See you next Thursday.